What's up guys, LeopoldTheBrave here, and today we're going to discuss how Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time could potentially influence Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled 2. Now, I don't think it's going to be the next game, or even the one after, but there's no way that it isn't happening with how successful Nitro-Fueled already was. And since it would be a direct sequel instead of another remake, they'd have to add a lot to it to make sure that it feels brand new. And despite Crash Bandicoot 4 only being one game, I still see a ton they could do with it. So, sit down, strap in, subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the newest uploads, blah 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 blah. According to my channel stats, you only do this when I remind you, so you brought this upon yourself. And let's begin. Starting off with characters. Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled 2 will likely use Crash 4's engine, or perhaps a brand new one entirely, meaning it would be impossible, or at the very least extremely difficult, to port and reuse the models from the Insane trilogy and the original Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled. So, with all the characters that they'd have to remodel and remake from scratch, I doubt we'd be starting off with the final roster that we ended up with in Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled. Some may have to be reintroduced through Grand Prix, or they could switch things around to freshen things up, like for example, the tag team racing characters could be there from the start and it would be the Nitro Kart characters that you unlock through a later Grand Prix. But then there also may be some characters that don't make the cut at all, like the baby characters, the Iron Checkpoint Crate, who knows, maybe they'll keep it for the meme. Maybe King Chicken, they might keep him too. But the original Rillaroo is definitely going bye-bye with the fixed one alone to take his name in place. On the reverse side of that though, to lighten things up, characters who were in the data and didn't make the cut the first time around may finally have their chance in the spotlight, like Ripto, the Sorceress, and Willy Wumpacheeks. This could also be the time for characters who weren't even considered by the devs at all, like the Evil Twins, Madame Amberly, Viscount, perhaps a couple more Spyro characters like Elora and Bianca, and finally the Crash Suit guy, and they could even do another crossover with Activision's other IPs like Skylanders or Tony Hawk. I'd love to see Tony Hawk in Crash Team Racing, like unironically. We haven't even dug into Crash Bandicoot 4 yet. Now of course there are some obvious choices like Alternate Universe Tana and Female Entropy, but there are a couple more. With the reuse of Embryo as a boss battle, they could potentially finally add his Hulk mode as a playable character this time. There are some standard enemies they could turn into characters like the crab or the octopus with a lot of swords from the pirate world. And of course there's Punchbot. But there's also a really cool idea I had involving Cortex. His redesign in Crash 4 was one of the redesigns that got a mixed reaction at first. People very quickly warmed up to it and actually turned out to like it a lot, but I'm sure the old design still has its fans. So my idea was to let both designs be in the game at once, his current Crash 4 design being just Cortex, and his old design being past Cortex. Now I know in Crash 4 past Cortex uses current Cortex's design too, but whatever, let's just let it slide. Either way, there's a lot you could do with the characters for a Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled sequel, and Crash 4 helps extend that even further. On the topic of items, there's a little reworking we could do. Lots of the items in Crash Team Racing don't really feel like Crash items, they're super generic. Bombs, missiles, power shields, invisibility thingies. How do we make them crashy? Well, for one, we could use the Quanta masks. For example, Lonnie Lowly and his phase shifting could replace the invisibility item. It could just keep its regular invisible properties, but it could also make you intangible too. Akano could replace the power shields, protecting you with his dark matter spin and taking a hit for you, but he could also reflect whatever's thrown at you in the process. Ika Ika and his gravity shifting could have a brand new item function, increasing the height of your jump. There would be some strategy involved though. If there were a bunch of ramps and gaps in a row, you wouldn't want to overshoot your jump. Kapuna was a bit tricky to figure out, but I came up with something. Now in your mind you may be thinking, why not just replace the time trial clock? But like the warp orb, that's already a crashy item, we don't need to crashify it. So instead of replacing an item like the time trial clock, Kapuna will serve a new purpose like Ika Ika. Instead of slowing down the other players, Kapuna will slow down the items on the track. So that way if you run into an item you won't get hurt because the item won't activate in time. Just like how Kapuna's power protects you from instantly setting off nitro crates in Crash 4. Not only that, but it could hurt other players in the process. Now of course there would be an indicator to let all the other players know when Kapuna's power is active, but some players may just be cruising along, not paying attention, and run into their own slow motion bomb that they just threw out. Sounds fun, doesn't it? So Quantum masks for CTR2. Finally, we come to the racetracks, which are pretty self-explanatory. Since it would be a sequel and not a remake, they can't just rely on the old tracks all over again. I mean, they could bring back some and revamp them like the Mario Kart games do, but the game would mostly have to be brand new tracks. Luckily, Crash 4 has plenty to offer, like Insanity Peak, the mysterious caverns where we discovered Lonnie Loli. Then of course there's the Japanese world where we used Akano. I don't think CTR has any tracks like that. And thanks to Offbeat, we have our own music level. And thanks to the swamps of Mosquito Marsh, Dingodile can finally have his own properly themed track instead of some generic canyon that he's never been in before. We could have another and more unique looking prehistoric track. There's Neon City, Crash Landed would make a good track. We could have a revamped Cortex Castle from the past. And this could be a new opportunity to include new Crash track ideas in general, not just ones from Crash 4. For example, the Wall of China from Crash 3. Overall though, I did have some concerns about a Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled sequel. I figured they may have overdid it with the first one, and that the second one would feel just like a repeat, or that they couldn't add much new to it. However, after the release of Crash 4, and with some brainstorming, I can see that this is not the case, and I'm excited for when this eventual sequel does pop up. But let me know what you guys think. What would you like to see in a Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled 2, and what do you think it could pull from Crash 4? And what do you think of my ideas? Let me know down in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time. LeopoldTheBrave, out.